A biotech company called Colossal recently claimed that they used genetic engineering to bring direwolves back from extinction. In this video, I'm going to break down one of the techniques they used to do it, and whether or not I think their claim holds water. Hi, I'm Troy. I majored in zoology, and I've been working in informal science communication for the past decade or so. I'm starting this channel today because I want to keep learning new things about science, and I love sharing what I learn with other people. I am by no means an expert in genetic engineering, but I hope to learn more, and I also hope that by sharing what I've learned, I can spark your curiosity as well. With that in mind, let's dive in. Colossal Biotech extracted DNA from fossils of an extinct canid called the direwolf and used gene editing to modify a gray wolf's genome into something new and different. Specifically, they used something called CRISPR-Cas9 to edit the genome. CRISPR is an immune response naturally occurring in certain bacteria. The name stands for clustered, regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. In other words, short repetitive sequences of DNA in the bacterium's genome. Then there's Cas, or CRISPR-associated systems, which are proteins. Cas proteins take foreign invaders, like viruses, and cut out a chunk of their genome and insert it in the middle of the bacterium's repeating DNA sequence, which again is the CRISPR. By putting the invader's gene into the bacterial genome, the bacterium is able to remember the invader for future interaction so it can better fight against it. This bacterium then makes RNA copies of the invader's genes that bind to a specific Cas protein called Cas9. Cas9 is sort of like molecular scissors. It zips around looking for these invaders, which it recognizes by the guide RNA that's bound to it. When it finds them, it cuts them at the site of the gene that it's trained to recognize. Bam! Immune system. So how is this used to make direwolves? Cas9 can be trained to look for any sequence of DNA that you want. To use an example, let's say that you want to add a genetic modification to a locus that codes for size. This gene is called LCORL. According to Colossal, the gene regulates size in canines, with the largest dogs missing part of the protein that it codes for. Colossal claims that in the direwolf DNA samples they got, the protein is missing the same part. So what they probably did was program the Cas9 to look for the LCORL gene and cut it at a specific place where the gene codes for smallness. In this case, I would assume that they didn't insert anything new since the gene just needed to be removed. But for other edits, they then insert tons of copies of the DNA sequence that they wanted to add to the genome. Then the DNA is repaired by natural biological mechanisms with the help of the template DNA. Now what's actually pretty cool here is that in most cases, you'd have to do these edits one at a time. But Colossal used a technique called multiplex CRISPR. Multiplex CRISPR allows you to edit multiple genes at the same time by using multiple different guide RNAs. This obviously gets more complicated with the more genes that you do it with, and to Colossal's credit, they seem to have figured out how to edit 20 loci on 14 genes that they identified as key to the differences between gray wolves and direwolves. So they did their edits to the gray wolf genome. The gene editing can be done in an adult organism, which is how we get gene therapies that treat diseases, but in Colossal's case, it's now time to take an egg cell, remove all the DNA, and insert this new DNA into it so it can develop into an embryo. Insert this developing egg into a domestic dog, gestate for a couple months, and out comes a gray wolf with targeted mutations that make it look and supposedly act like a direwolf. Is it actually a direwolf? You're gonna have to decide that one for yourself. But as far as I'm concerned, the fact is, Colossal claims to have made 20 edits across 14 genes to make a gray wolf into a direwolf. And according to geneticist Adam Rutherford, gray wolves have around 19,000 genes. Furthermore, gray wolves and direwolves diverged about 5.7 million years ago based on nuclear DNA evidence. Gray wolves are closer related to African wild dogs and even to jackals than they are to direwolves. This is the point at which I've been sounding skeptical for a while, so I should probably clearly state that I'm not anti-genetic engineering. Some great things have come out of CRISPR. For example, scientists have made tomatoes that accumulate vitamin D, which is really exciting to me as someone who has to take vitamin D supplements. They're also designing microalgae that can be used as a more efficient biofuel. And in December 2023, the FDA approved a CRISPR-based treatment for sickle cell anemia in patients ages 12 and older. But I have to say, I take big issue with genetically engineering these mock direwolves from a conservation standpoint. Also from the standpoint of thinking about the welfare of these puppies. They're social animals without a pack of their own species to live among. Who's gonna teach them how to hunt? I skimmed the husbandry manual that Colossal has on their webpage and couldn't find any mention of how they plan to teach them naturalistic behaviors in the absence of adults of their own species. In their promotional video discussing the developmental stages of the pups, it referred to a socialization period, but didn't show or mention any socialization with other canines. This is in the context of Robert Clark's story for Time magazine, which stated that Romulus and Remus, the two oldest of the direwolf pups, were removed from their surrogate mother at just a few days old because the mother was, and I quote, too attentive and kept disrupting the pups' sleeping and feeding. I'm also worried about how this de-extinction movement might cause people to think they don't need to worry about real conservation efforts. For example, the US Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, has all but implied that de-extinction solves the problem of endangered species. He said that the technology, and I quote, can help forge a future where populations are never at risk. And the scary thing is, I can see the logical thread he's following. After all, if you can clone a rhino, who cares if they go extinct? Why should we bother to conserve tigers in their jungles when corporations can just come in and recreate them at a price? These are the kinds of questions we're going to have to grapple with in this new era that Colossal is determined to bring us into.